Do one more? Alright, do one more. Hit 1. Oh no. Oh, Richard Dreyfuss spent 50 years hiding the real reason behind his most shocking public meltdown. In May 2024, he walked onto a Massachusetts stage and said things that made families flee the theater. Everyone thought they knew why he exploded. They were wrong. At 77, he's finally admitting what was really driving his rage that night. It started with a phone call 3 days earlier. Someone from his past had contacted him. What they told him changed everything. The meltdown wasn't about politics. It was about betrayal. Richard Dreyfuss was born on October 29, 1947, but his story began long before that. His father, Norman, had grown up in a part of Brooklyn shaped by gang violence, a place where toughness was survival. Years later, Norman became a respectable attorney and ran a restaurant, but the past always lingered. The family line carried more than just a Brooklyn edge. Richard later found out that his great-grand was Hesha Hefman, one of the revolutionaries who assassinated Tsar Alexander II in 1881. She was the only one in the group who escaped execution. So from assassins in Russia to street fights in New York, violence wasn't just something Dreyfuss acted. It was part of his bloodline. His mother, Geraldine, was the opposite. She was a peace activist, someone who spent her life pushing back against the kind of chaos her husband had come from. And Norman himself wasn't just hardened by childhood. A mortar explosion during World War II at the Battle of the Bulge left him with permanent injuries. He walked with crutches and wore army suit shoes for the rest of his life. That mix of raw past and progressive values shaped Richard early on. You could see it later in his roles. Ordinary men, cracking under pressure, emotionally torn. It wasn't an act. He'd lived near that edge since childhood. When he was just 9, everything shifted. It was 1956, and most boys that age were climbing trees or riding bikes. But Richard already knew he would be an actor. Not wanted to be, he was certain he would be. Then his father's hatred for New York triggered a family escape. They left Queens, spent time in Europe, then finally ended up in Los Angeles. But this wasn't a dream vacation. Norman was running from his past, dragging the whole family with him. Richard, stuck in the middle of it, kept chasing his dream. After jumping from city to city, he finally landed at Beverly Hills High School. That was where he started performing on stage at Temple Emmanuel's Art Center and later at the West Side Jewish Community Center under the guidance of drama teacher Bill Miller. Most kids had stability. Richard had constant motion, but somehow his passion kept growing. By the time he turned 18, the Vietnam War was pulling in everyone around him. But Richard made a bold move. He declared himself a conscientious objector. Instead of heading to the battlefield, he spent 2 years working in a hospital in Los Angeles, helping people while the world around him was falling apart. This was around 1965 to 1967. By day, he was in the hospital. By night, he chased acting jobs, bit roles in shows like Peyton Place, Gidget, Room 222, and Bewitched. He had enrolled in San Fernando Valley State College for a year, but the hospital work and acting gigs quickly took over. He wasn't out protesting, and he wasn't holding a rifle. He chose a third path, quiet service during the day and theater work in the evenings. He was literally building his career from behind the front lines. His first real appearance came in 1964 when he was just 15. He showed up in a show called In Mama's House, but he'd actually been on Peyton Place even earlier. That was his first paid role. Most teenagers worry about grades. Richard was already working, and not everyone at home was thrilled. His father, dealing with war trauma and his own broken dreams, didn't support his son's career. The tension grew until it snapped. When Richard was 21, Norman left the family. They were no longer speaking when Norman died. So, for all of Richard's early success, he carried that silence with him. His path to fame was built while his family was falling apart. Through all this, he was developing a completely different way of acting. While many others were memorizing lines and following rules, Richard was diving into improvisation at the Jewish Community Center. These weren't just acting classes. They were workshops where he learned how to live in a scene, how to respond in the moment without needing a script. He believed acting couldn't be taught in a classroom. It had to be lived. That raw, natural style became his signature in the years ahead. In 1967, he got his first film role in The Graduate. It was just one line. Shall I get the cops? I'll get the cops. But that film would go on to make $104.9 million at the box office. That's nearly $857 million today. Almost no one noticed him at the time, but millions of people had unknowingly witnessed the first movie moment of someone who would win an Oscar less than a decade later. He was 19, an extra in a boarding house scene, and director Mike Nichols had no idea he was filming the future star of Jaws and Close Encounters. The next year, he landed his first leading role in The Young Runaways, and it almost ended everything. The movie was a disaster. Dreyfuss was only 20, but they made him play a 32-year-old hippie draft dodger, speaking in bizarre phrases like, "I'm all hung up in my own hassles, baby." Critics ripped it apart. They said the acting, the music, the writing, everything was terrible. The dialogue didn't even sound like real people from the 1960s. It was written by a 51-year-old man who clearly didn't understand youth culture. The whole thing became a cult joke, but for Dreyfuss, it was a brutal lesson. Just because you're the lead doesn't mean it's a good idea. By 1973, things were shifting. He played babyface Nelson in Dillinger, a violent, twitchy role that caught everyone's attention. He didn't just act the part. He studied real FBI files, learning about the man who had killed more agents than anyone else in history. Nelson had been small, just 5'4", and had a thirst for blood. Dreyfuss leaned into that, portraying him as someone who killed for the fun of it. It was chilling. The budget was low, only $1.5 million, and Dreyfuss made $25,000. But the performance stood out. Spielberg noticed. It wasn't long before Jaws came calling. A year later, in 1974, the apprenticeship of Duty Kravitz took him even deeper. The story followed a Jewish boy trying to escape poverty in Montreal's Jewish ghetto, a story that echoed Dreyfuss' own heritage. His family had come from Austria, Hungary, and he understood what it meant to fight for a future. The novel had been shelved for over 15 years. Studios said it was too ethnic for audiences. But when the film finally got made, Dreyfuss gave it everything. He was paid $50,000 and received glowing reviews, especially from Pauline Kael. The film showed the anti-Semitism of 1940 Montreal and captured the raw hunger of a boy desperate to succeed. It was the role that proved he could carry serious dramas and connect them to his own roots. Then came American Graffiti. George Lucas saw Dreyfuss in a pilot for Happy Days that hadn't even aired yet. That's how he ended up cast as Kurt Henderson. The film had a tiny budget, just $777,000, and was shot in 28 nights in Paluma after another town pulled their filming permit. Dreyfuss made $25,000, and the film went on to gross $140 million worldwide. His role, chasing after a mysterious blonde in a white Thunderbird, mirrored Lucas's own teenage experiences in Modesto. At first, Universal wanted to bury the movie. But after test screenings blew audiences away, they rushed Happy Days to TV to ride the wave. Dreyfuss had played the thoughtful one in the group, the one deciding whether to leave for college or stay behind. And the role hit home for people everywhere. Richard Dreyfuss didn't start out chasing fame, but in 1975, everything changed when he stepped into the role of Matt Hooper, the quick-witted marine biologist in Jaws. The filming itself was a nightmare. Shooting started in May 1974 at Martha's Vineyard and dragged on until October. The mechanical sharks were constantly breaking down, which forced Spielberg to hide the monster more than show it. That creative decision ended up making the movie even scarier. Dreyfuss shared intense scenes with Robert Shaw, especially the haunting monologue about the USS Indianapolis. That became one of the most unforgettable moments in cinema. But strangely, Dreyfuss later called Jaws boring. He said he doesn't like talking about it and finds the whole topic dull. Still, the film exploded at the box office, becoming the highest-grossing movie in history until Star Wars came out 2 years later. Adjusted for inflation, it made around $1.5 billion and changed the summer blockbuster forever. And just like that, Dreyfuss was no longer just an actor. He was a star. 2 years later, in 1977, Dreyfuss starred in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, another Spielberg project. This time, he played Roy Neri, an ordinary man whose life slowly falls apart after a mysterious UFO sighting. Spielberg had started developing the idea in 1973, and the movie ended up costing nearly $20 million to make. It grossed over $300 million worldwide. Dreyfuss had to show a man unraveling, building a huge model of Devil's Tower in his living room while his family gave up on him. That scene wasn't just dramatic, it was heartbreaking. His performance captured the mix of wonder and madness that made the story feel real. Spielberg even said that if we could learn to talk to aliens in that film, maybe we could also learn to talk to the Soviets during the Cold War. The movie made Dreyfuss even bigger in Hollywood. That same year, he shocked everyone again, but this time with a love story. The Goodbye Girl, directed by Herbert Ross and written by Neil Simon, showed Dreyfuss as Elliot Garfield, a struggling actor sharing an apartment with a woman and her daughter. The role was funny, sweet, and real, and it paid off in a big way. In 1978, he became the youngest man ever to win the Academy Award for Best Actor, just 30 years old. The film made over $100 million, massive amount for a romantic comedy. At the time, audiences loved him not just as the intense guy from Jaws, but also as someone who could carry romance and comedy with charm and vulnerability. In 1978, while still riding the success of The Goodbye Girl, Dreyfuss chose a very different project. In The Big Fix, he played Moses Wine, a private investigator caught up in leftover 60s radical politics. It was more than just a detective story. It was personal. Dreyfuss had been politically active himself, and the film let him bring that passion to the screen. It didn't make waves at the box office, but it showed his range and willingness to take risks for what he believed in. Then came The Competition in 1980. Dreyfuss played a piano prodigy. But here's the twist. He didn't know how to play a single note when he got the role. So, He trained 4 hours a day for 2 straight months. The producers brought in piano experts and demanded total authenticity. Every movement, every key press had to be right. One day on set, an actress set her wine glass on a grand piano during a scene. The piano coach screamed out in pain. It was that serious. The film captured the world of high-stakes classical performance and showed how far Dreyfuss would go to live inside a role. In 1981, he pushed even deeper with Whose Life Is It Anyway? Playing a sculptor paralyzed in a car crash. Dreyfuss tackled one of the most controversial topics of the time: euthanasia. His character didn't want to live hooked up to machines, and the film explored whether patients have the right to choose death over life. Critics said he found humor without losing the pain, and the movie got people asking hard questions about who really controls the end of life: doctors or the patients themselves. After a quiet spell, Dreyfuss came roaring back in 1986 with Down and Out in Beverly Hills. He starred alongside Bette Midler and Nick Nolte in Disney's first ever R-rated film. Under the Touchstone label, the comedy was wild and mostly improvised, and audiences loved it. The movie opened at number 1 and eventually made over $60 million on a $14 million budget. It was a major comeback, especially after his public struggles with drug addiction. The next year, in Tin Men, he played B.B. Hosky, an aluminum siding salesman in the 1960s, who goes to war with Danny DeVito's character after a minor car accident. What starts as a simple feud turns into an all-out battle, including seducing each other's wives. It was funny and sharp, but it also tapped into something deeper. Two broken men trying to win at something because they were losing at life. By the end, both had lost their licenses and careers, but maybe found a bit of themselves. In 1989, he reunited with Spielberg for Always, a remake of a 1943 film. He played a firefighting pilot who dies and comes back as a guardian spirit. Audrey Hepburn appeared in her final role. Spielberg had wanted to make this film for years, and the timing was emotional. His divorce had just been announced that same year. The movie was about letting go, about love, about death, and Dreyfuss's performance reflected all of that. Still, old tensions between Spielberg and Dreyfuss lingered behind the scenes, and the collaboration wasn't as smooth as it once was. Dreyfuss's personal life was just as dramatic. In 1983, he met Jeremy Rain at a party. They got married only 10 days after meeting. That same year, their daughter Emily was born. Then came Benjamin in 1986. But something was wrong. His eyes looked different. Doctors diagnosed him with Peter's anomaly, a rare eye condition. He later lost vision in one eye. It shattered Dreyfuss. He said it was the most emotional moment of his life. A third child, Harry, was born in 1990, but the marriage eventually collapsed. By 1995, Jeremy had taken the kids and left. The tension wasn't just at home. On the set of What About Bob? In 1991, Dreyfuss clashed with Bill Murray in one of Hollywood's ugliest feuds. One night, Murray screamed in his face that everyone hated him, then hurled a heavy ashtray at him. It barely missed. Murray also threw their producer into a lake and broke her sunglasses. Dreyfuss called him a drunken bully and a pig. For years, he avoided even mentioning the film, but in 2020, he said he might write a note one day and finally let it go. In 2001, Dreyfuss starred in The Education of Max Bickford, playing a recovering alcoholic professor. He earned $100,000 per episode, but the show struggled. It was one of the first series shot entirely in high definition. It tackled bold issues like transgender characters and academic politics, but the ratings didn't survive. CBS fired 2 producers after just a month, and the show was canceled after 1 season. Then in 2008, he stepped into the shoes of Dick Cheney for Oliver Stone's political film, W Original. Stone wanted Robert Duvall, but when he refused, Dreyfuss took the role and tensions exploded. He and Stone fought constantly, and Dreyfuss even slammed the director in interviews. He shocked viewers by defending Cheney and blaming the American people for not pushing back during the Bush years. The film flopped, earning just under $30 million against a $25 million budget. At age 63, he did something no one expected. He joined the action-packed film Red in 2010 and did his own stunts. He played arms dealer Alexander Dunning alongside Bruce Willis and Helen Mirren. He trained for 3 months, suffered minor injuries, but refused to let a stunt double take his place. The movie made $199 million and earned a Golden Globe nomination. His role was originally meant for someone in their 40s, but he proved older actors could still steal the spotlight. In 2016, he transformed into Bernie Madoff for the ABC miniseries Madoff. To prepare, he studied court records, interviews, and victim testimonies for 6 months. He dropped 15 pounds and dyed his hair silver. He got death threats from real Madoff victims who didn't want the story dramatized. But the critics praised him. He made the villain believable, not by excusing him, but by making him human. Then in 2019, at 72, he starred in Astronaut, playing an elderly man who still dreams of going to space. The film mirrored his own battles with age and depression. he revealed that he'd struggled with bipolar disorder for years. The movie was shot in freezing Canadian weather over just 24 days. It didn't make headlines, but it gave him a quiet moment of grace. A man out of time, still dreaming big, Richard Dreyfuss was once on top of the world, riding the wave of success from movies like Jaws and Close Encounters. But by 1982, things had taken a dangerous turn. That year, he passed out behind the wheel of his Mercedes-Benz 450 SL and slammed into a palm tree in Benedict Canyon. When he woke up, he was dangling upside down, strapped in by a seatbelt he didn't remember fastening. In the wreckage, police found cocaine and he was arrested. But that wasn't the only thing haunting him. For years, he had visions of a little girl in a pink dress and horn-rimmed glasses. She'd appear in the strangest places, even during wild parties. Something about her filled him with dread. Then on November 19, 1982, he quit drugs cold. A year later, to the exact day his daughter was born, wearing horn-rimmed glasses. Dreyfuss has said he doesn't know if she was the girl he didn't kill that night or the spirit that came to warn him. But not all of Dreyfuss' battles were with himself. In 2012, he went after his own father and uncle in court. 20 years earlier, he had handed over $870,000 during what he was told was a family emergency. It turned out there was no emergency. They used the money to quietly buy a 13-story building in downtown Los Angeles. Dreyfuss was never told, even though he funded nearly a third of the deal. They insisted he owned only 10%. When they won a $5,